The Olympics are a time for everyone to get together and look at the Olympic rings, cheer for their country, and celebrate some insane athletic feats. Still, international conflicts, controversies, and world crises can happen during the Games. From boycotts, protests, and postponements to victories that stop the show and set records, we bring you the Olympic moments that changed history. So don't go anywhere. First up, let's look at when the first female athletes participated. At the 1900 Olympics in Paris, only 22 of the 997 athletes were women. This was the first time that women took part in Olympic events. They could only compete in tennis, sailing, croquet, equestrian sports, and golf back then. Things have changed a lot since then, which is a good sign. At the London Olympics in 2012, women competed in every sport for the first time. Now any new sport that joins the Olympics must have women competing in it. Moving on, Jesse Owens breaks records in 1936. Nazi Germany's 1936 Summer Olympics were supposed to show that Aryans were superior to other races, but the best athlete at the Games was a black man named Jesse Owens. People now think of the American as one of the best Olympians ever because he won gold in the 100-meter, 200-meter, 4x100-meter relay, and long jump. In the second event, German athlete Karl Ludwig Long, who ended up in second place, gave Owens some advice. Long was the first person to congratulate Owens after the event, and the two walked arm in arm to get their medals. Owens later said, "He had to have a lot of courage to befriend me in front of Hitler. Even if you melted down all the medals and cups I have, they wouldn't compare to the 24K friendship I felt for Luz Long at that moment." Next up, athletes first compete in wheelchairs. In 1948, Sir Ludwig Guttmann, a neurologist in the UK who worked with war veterans with spinal injuries, used sports as part of his patients' recovery plans. Over time, other spinal injury units started to use Guttmann's methods, and athletic competitions between hospitals were set up. Guttmann brought 400 wheelchair athletes to the 1960 Olympics in Rome, which were the first to be shown on TV. This event was called the Parallel Olympics. Since then, the Paralympics have grown and grown. At London 2012, 4,302 athletes from 164 national Paralympic committees competed in 503 events. Next, the Games were televised in Rome in 1960. As the first Olympics to be shown on TV and to have an athlete promote a brand, the Rome Games started a new era of commercialism and changed how the world saw Olympians. One bad thing about the Games was that the first doping scandal showed how far some athletes would go to win the gold. Coming up, athletes participated in a civil rights protest. Two really important political events happened during the Summer Olympics in Mexico City in 1968. 10 days before the opening ceremony of the Games, Mexican students held a protest in the Tlatelolco neighborhood of Mexico City at the Plaza of Three Cultures. They don't like it when the government spend money on the Olympics instead of on social programs. The Mexican army surrounded the plaza and started shooting, killing more than 200 protesters and injuring more than 1,000. This terrible event, called the Tlatelolco Massacre, is still remembered today. Also, American politics made their way into the competition. During the men's 200-meter award ceremony, Tommy Smith and John Carlos spoke out against how their country treated black people. They stood on the first and third place podiums barefoot and bowed their heads while raising a single black glove during the U.S. national anthem. The American sprinters and Australia's Peter Norman, who came in second, all wore badges that stood for human rights. Smith and Carlos were banned right away by both the IOC and the USOC. Let's look at Munich in 1972, where terror overshadowed peace. The terrorist attack on Israel's team by Palestinians during the 1972 Games was an unfortunate and truly sad incident. On September 5, 1972, 8 terrorists from the Black September group sneaked into the Olympic Village and killed 2 members of the Israeli team. They also took 9 other people hostage and tried to trade them for 200 Palestinian prisoners. The terrorists were able to get themselves and the hostages to a nearby airport after a standoff with a weak German police force. When the terrorists' plans to trap the German police failed, they killed the Israeli hostages. 5 of the 8 Palestinian terrorists were then killed by the police, and 1 German police officer was also killed. Let's look at Montreal, where African nations boycotted the Games. After the IOC didn't ban New Zealand from the 1976 Olympics in Montreal, about a dozen countries, mostly in Africa, didn't show up. The national rugby team of New Zealand went on a tour of South Africa. Since 1964, South Africa has been banned from the Olympics because of its apartheid policies. Even though the boycott didn't get New Zealand kicked out of the Games, it did hurt the Games financially and in terms of sports. Most importantly, it brought attention to the policies of apartheid in South Africa around the world. In fact, there were protests against apartheid when the South African Springboks played rugby in New Zealand in 1981. Coming up next, in 1980 Moscow, the United States boycotted and hosted alternate games. President Jimmy Carter asked U.S. allies to pull their Olympic teams out of the games to protest the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan while the Cold War was still going on. The U.S. did not take part in the Olympics that summer. Instead, they held the Liberty Bell Classic in Philadelphia as a competition for athletes from countries that supported the boycott. Following that, in Barcelona, the pros played in the Olympics. The 1992 U.S. men's Olympic basketball team was known as the Dream Team for a good reason. It included some of the best basketball players of all time, like Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley, and Patrick Ewing. It was the first time that NBA players who were still playing were asked to join an Olympic team. As it made its way to the final, the Dream Team blew away the competition. In the end, it beat Croatia to win the gold medal. Even now, most people agree that the Dream Team was the best sports team ever put together. Up next, the Games turned 100 with Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali was involved with the Olympics for a long time before he died. The Olympic gold medalist in boxing in 1960, lighting the Olympic cauldron on the 100th anniversary of the Olympics, may be the most memorable moment in the history of the Olympics. Cassius Clay, as he was known at the time, won an Olympic gold medal in Rome in 1960. Even though racism was a big problem in his home country, Clay was a big fan of the Olympics and his U.S. teammates. Clay loved the Olympics and slept with his medal next to him. When he got back to the U.S., he was turned away from a whites-only restaurant and threw his medal into a river. Muhammad Ali lit the flame at the 1996 Atlanta Games, even though he had Parkinson's disease. This was 100 years after the first modern Olympics, which took place in Athens. Just by the way, the International Olympic Committee gave him a replacement medal. Adding to that, North and South Korea briefly united in 2000. During the opening ceremony in Sydney, North and South Korea marched together for the first time, marking the beginning of what would be a small moment of alliance. Instead of carrying the flags of their respective nations, the North Korean and South Korean teams joined hands and waved a flag that represented unification. The flag featured a blue map of Korea. Up next, in 2004, the medal design was corrected. The long-standing layout by Italian sculptor Giuseppe Cassioli that incorrectly depicted a Greek venue rather than the Roman Colosseum was replaced with a new design that was distributed to winners at the Athens Games. The Pan-Athenaic Stadium in Athens, which is one of the oldest stadiums in the world and served as the venue for the very first modern Olympic Games in 1896, is now featured on Olympic medals. Moving on, in 2008, Michael Phelps took home a lot of gold. The American swimming champion Michael Phelps and the rest of his team broke a world record in the medley relay competition when they were competing in the Beijing Olympics. Phelps was awarded his 8th gold medal, the most won in a single Olympic Games. This pushed his medal count past that of his predecessor, Mark Spitz, who held the record for most medals won in a single Olympic Games. After the awarding of his 8th medal, Michael Phelps addressed his audience with some words of modesty and talked about how records are meant to be broken. Lastly, COVID-19 delays the 2020 Games. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic that was occurring at the time, Japan's then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe made the announcement to postpone the Games on March 24, 2020. Despite the fact that the Games were postponed until the summer of 2021 and still officially referred to as the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, they weren't cancelled outright, as that hadn't happened since 1944. That's a wrap for this video. Which one of these moments spoke to you? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.